Developed in 1807 by Joseph Hill Harvey, Harvey, Louisiana was originally founded as a company town. Joseph Harvey would ultimately rename the cosmopolitan city for his family's surname. Built in 1844, the home of Marie Louise Destrehan and her husband Joseph Hill Harvey will be known as the Harvey Castle. It will serve as the third courthouse of Jefferson Parish from 1874 to 1884. The Harvey Castle will be demolished in 1924 to expand the Harvey Canal when it became part of the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway. Located on the south side of the Mississippi, which is referred to as the West Bank, Harvey is within the New Orleans, Metairie, Kenner metropolitan area. Construction of the GNO Bridge will begin in November of 1954. The landmark project will be completed and open to traffic on April 15, 1958. The GNO stretches 1,575 feet, making it the longest cantilever bridge in the world at the time. Constructing the second span of the GNO will begin March of 1981. The project was slated to be completed before the World's Fair of 1984. That failed promise would go unanswered, as the new bill would not be open to traffic until September of 1988. The Louisiana legislature will officially coin the bridge as the Crescent City Connection. For as long as I can remember, there has always been an I am better than you rivalry between the East Bank and West Bank. Who started this? Who started that? Who has the best this? Who has the best that? Which side has more hitters, steppers, and gangsters? Who has the better women? Who started the most trends? Who wears the better clothes? This is somewhat of a sibling rivalry that will continue to go on for generation after generation. The one thing that they both have in common is they're both ride or die Saints fans. You may find a few drifters here and there, but for the most part, they are both rocking with the Saints. The NO, known for its 17 wards, like a pot of gumbo, has a mixture of it all. Every hood has its own uniqueness. You can pretty much tell where a person is from based on slang, attitude, swag, and sometimes even skin tone. Rodney, Terrence, Alton, Christopher, Jern, all hail from the UPT. However, these names wouldn't be the only ones to make noise in the city. David Williams, aka Mr. Harvey, and Rob Williams, aka The Rob, would both hail from the West Bank. Not to be overshadowed by the East Bank, David and Rob were both about that life and getting it how they live. Born to Gwen Williams in 1984, David Charles Williams and his brother Robert were just like any other youth coming up in impoverished environments. Feeling like there was no way out, they would both take to the streets, hustling in the Scottsdale and Haydale neighborhoods on the West Bank as part of what we now know today as the Harvey Hustlers. The first federal indictments would come in 2012. Prosecutors would link the gang to the April 1st, 2010 crushing of Reginald Francois. It was alleged that for years, the Harvey Hustlers operated an illegal narcotics ring from West Jefferson neighborhoods, bringing in that soft in 11.5 from Texas. It is also alleged that the muscle for the Harvey Hustlers would be a group of men known as the M Squad. The Harvey Hustlers would develop a reputation as the most feared gang on the West Bank. They will be tied to at least 7 crushings, including deleting an elderly British city woman. The Harvey Hustlers were known for transporting multiple birds of that white in 11.5 per month. Identified by their flashy jewelry and clothing, the Harvey Hustlers would also bear double H tats and burning gauze tats stamped Harvey. The Harvey Hustlers' actions weren't only directed at their ops, there would be a rift within its own ranks. A state grand jury would ultimately hand up a 30-count indictment on the Harvey Hustlers, charging 21 alleged members in a racketeering scheme. The indictment will link them to a criminal enterprise, charging them all with racketeering and conspiring to sell that soft, 11.5, and that perp. This indictment will be filed in the 24th Judicial District Court in Gretna, a month after federal prosecutors filed indictments in United States District Court of New Orleans, tying 12 alleged Harvey Hustlers to 4 West Bank crushings in addition to moving that work and multiple weapons offenses. According to an affidavit filed in court by the FBI, the DEA began investigating the Harvey Hustlers in October of 2009. The state indictment would allege an array of charges publicly linking the Harvey Hustlers to crushings and attempted crushings for the first time ever. Elka Smith of Harvey will be charged with second-degree murking on November 17, 2013, deletion of Dante Hall. Hall was hit up numerous times in the 2600 block of Pelican Bay Boulevard in Marrero. It is alleged that Elka crushed Hall as an act of retaliation in connection with moving that work. It was also alleged that Elka brought in more than 20 birds from Texas, which he rocked up and moved in the streets. Smith was one of the 2 men scooped up by DEA agents in Texas in 2013 while transporting 7,468 grams of that white and 14 racks in separate cars. It is alleged that Robert Lil Rod Williams put a bag on Albert Bullock. Raheem Robinson would take the hit. Albert Bullock would be deleted in January of 2011. On November 13, 2013, the Fed intercept a phone call in which Rob allegedly authorized an unknown person to crush Tosh Tucson. Carrie Renard of Marrero will crush Danny Antoine for selling whammies on one of the sets of the Harvey Hustlers. Charlie Gumbs, LeSean Davis, and Devontae Robinson would all be brought up on second-degree murking charges. They would also be charged by the state in the April 22, 2013 shooting at the Lapalco Court Apartments in Harvey, in which 3 toddlers ages 1, 2, and 3 and 2 women ages 63 and 67 were wounded. Frankie Hookfin Jr. would also be accused of this shooting. Frankie will face trial in state court on those charges. The feds will serve up an indictment charging Frankie and 5 other alleged Harvey Hustlers in 4 West Bank crushings. Among their alleged victims was Dorita Richardson, who was in her home in the 300 block of 5th Street with her grandson, his girlfriend, and a 3-year-old girl. Gunmen would open fire. Dorita Richardson would pass February 15, 2013 on her kitchen floor. Frankie and 3 others will be accused of deleting Emil Washington in February of 2013. The Harvey Hustlers would also be accused of crushing Shawana Gerard and Willie Odom in August of 2012. Their bodies will be found in a car at Highway 90 and Lapalco Boulevard. It is alleged that the Harvey Hustlers were involved in a shooting on February 18th of 2012 on the elevated West Bank Expressway in Gretna. One of them will be accused as the shooter, the other an alleged victim. Rasheed Smith will be accused of being one of 3 men in a vehicle who drove up on another whip as they traveled on the elevated roadway. Rasheed and his group, who will be armed with a cutter and a Glock, would allegedly open fire on the 3 occupants of the other whip as they approached the Lafayette Street exit. Let's rewind to 2010. David Williams, a.k.a. Mr. Harvey, was identified as the leader of the Harvey Hustlers until he was deleted in late 2010. The Harvey Hustlers would be balling out of control. However, there would be a fight for power of leadership positions. A war would break out, dividing the men into those who were riding for David and for those who were riding for brothers Melvin and Jermaine Hudson. The crushing of Chad Jones would spark outrage from David, who would later learn that Laval London was involved with the crushing of Chad. David would put a bag on Laval's head. Laval would be crushed August 21st of 2010. Melvin and Jermaine would not let this ride. David Williams, a.k.a. Mr. Harvey, would be crushed on September 17th, 2010. It is alleged that the Harvey Hustlers were separated into groups based on their loyalties. Those riding with Melvin and Jermaine will be known as the Murder Squad and YBS, Young, Black, and Successful. Those loyal to David and Rob were steadfast to the moniker Double H, a.k.a. the Harvey Hustlers. Bryant and Derek Gumbs, siblings who lived in Harvey, would each plead guilty to racketeering, conspiracy to distribute that soft, and conspiracy to distribute that dog food. The Gumbs brothers would admit to their roles in a criminal enterprise. They would be sentenced to 20 years for racketeering, 15 years for conspiracy to distribute coke, and 20 years for conspiracy to distribute that 11.5. Of the 21 defendants, 14 would either plead guilty or were convicted at trial. Robert C. Williams, 24, of Avondale, was convicted by Jefferson Parish jury on November 11th. He was sentenced to 120 years. Elka Smith, 29, of Harvey, stood trial with Robert Williams and was sentenced to 65 years. Willie Thornton, 31, of Harvey, pleaded guilty on January 13th. He was sentenced to 20 years. LaShawn Davis of Gretna pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 20 years. Devontae D. Robertson, 21, of Gretna, pleaded guilty on December 15th. He was sentenced to 15 years. LSC Landix, 30, of Marrero, pleaded guilty on January 13th. He was sentenced to 20 years. Paul Smith, 26, of Avondale, pleaded guilty September 28th. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Brandon J. Martin, 29, of New Orleans, pleaded guilty on January 19th. He was sentenced to 20 years. Cottrell B. Gomes, 25, of Harvey, pleaded guilty on January 13th. Stephanie J. Bradley, 44, of Harvey, pleaded guilty to racketeering on October 19th. Corey H. Trent, 26, of Marrero, pleaded guilty on August 17th. He was sentenced to 8 years. Gintaz Argadian, 28, of Harahan, pleaded guilty on December 11th. He was sentenced to 10 years. Rashid Smith, 25, of Oswego, pleaded guilty on January 4th. He was sentenced to 20 years. Nathan Carter, 31, of Gretna, pleaded guilty on October 8th. He was sentenced to 20 years. Marlon Mercy, 38, of Fresno, Texas, was indicted separately in connection with the Harvey Hustlers in March of 2015. Marlon pleaded guilty on October 23rd and was sentenced to 10 years in prison.